A radio sits in a neat Dresden apartment, and out of it comes a voice asking, "Do you want total war?" It's said with confidence, almost like a joke, but the answer is already written. Meanwhile, somewhere else in Germany, in a town square, boys with hollow cheeks stand next to old men. They raise their right hands and swear to defend every street, every house, every doorway. It's late 1944, and the loudest voices are promising that if people just hold on, if they just have enough willpower, they can beat tanks and bombers. A siren goes off, one note, then another, pulling people out of bed, out of shops, off trams. Underground now, down in a cellar in Dresden, a man named Victor Klemperer is there. He's a scholar, someone who studies words for a living. But words have let him down completely this year. He's Jewish, under Nazi law, fired from his job, barely surviving. Still, he writes everything down. His wife Eva has a bag waiting by the door. Inside are papers, a little food, and what you might call a thin slice of hope. The siren becomes a wail. The cellar is packed. People press shoulder to shoulder, breath mixing in the cold, damp air. Coal dust covers everyone the same. A woman prays. A man counts the seconds between the whistle of something falling and when it hits, 6, 7, 8 seconds. A child starts to cry. Someone tells them to be brave. Above them, the radio voice still promises victory. Down here, people are wondering, how much longer can we take this? An explosion hits like someone slamming a door overhead. Dust falls from the ceiling. Another hit, then more. The lights flicker, then go out. The darkness presses down like a weight. The door to the street, thick wood with an iron latch, shifts and gets stuck. Survival comes from desperation. A wrench, a shoulder, a boot heel. 3 men push against that door. Nothing. The cellar shakes. Someone coughs. Eva says Victor's name, just once, steady. They try again. The latch screams. A crack of cool night air cuts through all that dust. They will remember that crack of air for the rest of their lives. When they finally tumble out, the old city glows without any sun. The wind is hot. Every breath tastes like burned paper. That's your first minute. The confident voice and the stuck door, the oath in the square and the white heat outside. Tonight we follow real people, people you can picture as they live through a collapsing world, watching as all the big promises fall apart. October 18th, 1944. Germany announces something called the Volkssturm. The name means people's storm. On paper, it sounds like a surge of power. In living rooms and meeting halls, boys are pulled out of school and men pulled out of retirement. 16 to 60, that's the rule. If you can stand, you can serve. A clerk reads the names. A shopkeeper makes a joke about it, then stops himself. There's a law against saying anything that might hurt morale. The joke just hangs there in the air. There's a 16-year-old kid named Hans-Georg Henke in a uniform that's way too big. His stomach hurts from hunger, but he won't tell anyone. He raises his hand in the town square, eyes straight ahead, because that's what you do. Near the back, his mother holds a handkerchief to her face. The oath is the same whether you're 16 or 60. It says you'll hold the line, that the line is now your own street, and that if you doubt any of this, you're a traitor. It's technically a performance. It's also a death sentence. It ties them to words that the bombers don't even hear. Far from the front, in Laubach, Hesse, a man named Friedrich Kellner works at the courthouse during the day. At night, he writes by lamplight. He's not a soldier, he's a man with a notebook. He writes down the posters he sees, the speeches he hears, the neighbours who nod along because it's safer than asking questions. He figures out that propaganda isn't just noise. It's a rule book for what you're allowed to say in public. He writes that the path to reason is blocked by those rules. But he writes it anyway. Across Germany, these new Volkssturm units line up for training. Some get anti-tank weapons and maybe 5 minutes of instruction. Others drill with brooms. The numbers on paper are more like a wish. Germany has already promised all the men it could. Now the state is saying everyone is a soldier. But the real world tells a different story. The shops have less food. The cellars have less coal. More funerals. People plan their walks to avoid being outside when the bombers usually come. Meanwhile, in Berlin, a young journalist named Ursula von Kardorff writes about a city that's both starving and stubborn at the same time. She notes the rumours people spread in breadlines, little stories you repeat so you don't feel so alone. She writes down how the air raid sirens have become part of the daily rhythm, like church bells nobody wants to hear. She describes a friend who made a critical joke about the government at dinner. Then the friend disappeared. The official reason is long and legal and lethal, undermining military morale. It sounds almost like a medical term. But it means your life ends in a file. There's a real example. A U-boat captain named Oscar Kusch said the propaganda was lies. He took down a leader's picture from the wall. His own officers reported him. He was tried, found guilty, and shot in May 1944. The message is crystal clear. Even if the maps show you're losing, your words have to show victory. If you shake your head at the wrong moment, the state will make you an example. The punishment isn't just prison, it's death. People learn to speak two ways, one for the street and one for behind closed doors. 16 to 60 is a massive age range. It means Germany is desperate, really desperate. It means that in a town of a few thousand people, the Volkssturm can suddenly have triple the soldiers on paper while losing all the bakers and builders who actually keep people fed and sheltered. When the Western Allies crossed the Rhine in March 1945, a lot of the people they face are men who raised their hands just a few months earlier in a square somewhere, given a promise and a gun that might actually work, but the radio keeps saying, "The situation is fine." A woman in Berlin turns the dial, trying to make the words sound true. A boy in Henke's unit learns how to drill and how to stay alive, where to hide when planes come, how to steady your breathing and your hands. He tells himself the men on the posters look like him. He tries to believe that a poster can turn a person into steel. Back in Laubach, one night Pauline, Friedrich Kellner's wife, asks if writing everything down is safe. He says, "It is not safe," and then he keeps writing. He believes the truth has to survive in someone's handwriting, even if that person might not be alive tomorrow. It's simple, it's necessary, the state can lock a door, a notebook can slip through a crack. By late autumn, those cracks are everywhere. Food rations keep getting smaller, trains arrive late or don't arrive at all, people notice which streets get rebuilt first after a bombing and which ones never do. Young people talk about a secret weapon that's supposed to save them. Old people talk about 1918 in quiet voices, then change the subject. There's a law for saying the wrong thing. There's a law for sounding tired. Henke gets his orders. He's going to help run anti-aircraft guns. He tells himself this is what soldiers do, though he keeps his eyes down when the older men talk. He's checking the sky more than the horizon now. The sky is the front line that comes to you whether you want it or not. February 13th, 1945, Dresden. A siren starts up and won't stop. Victor and Eva squeeze into a narrow stairwell packed with neighbours, forcing a cellar door shut as wind rushes past them. The ground shakes. A man with rough carpenter's hands starts counting under his breath. 7 seconds, 10 seconds, and soon half the room is counting too. The floor jumps hard. A woman nearly loses the little boy's hand, but catches it again. Victor wraps his scarf over his mouth and nose. Eva rubs dust from her eye and laughs, surprised at herself. Above them, the city is burning. Roofs collapse into courtyards. Courtyards turn into chimneys. Heat pulls oxygen up and out, and the draft slams cellar doors tight. It turns whole blocks into ovens. Down in the cellar, the air gets thin. The lamp goes out. The door groans as the building shifts. The carpenter says now, and 3 men throw their shoulders into it. The lock screams. Nothing. Again, he says. Someone hurls a toolbox at the hinge. It rings out. Again. The third push cracks it open. Just a slice of night like a blade, and air pours through hot enough to burn their eyes. The crack widens. The door gives. The room breathes out like a lung. They step into a street you can't recognise anymore. The cobblestones glow like hot coals. A tram is fused to its rails, melted like a toy left on a stove. The river reflects a burning city, and flames climb the reflection like the water itself is on fire. People move like they're sleepwalking. Some carry suitcases, some carry nothing. Victor feels the notebook in his pocket. He doesn't need to check it to know it's still there, but he does anyway. They navigate by landmarks that aren't there. The church tower where they used to meet is just a black finger now, pointing at nothing. A row of shops is one long scar. Fire pulls air so fast across the square that paper skitters without touching the ground. They lean into the wind and cross. On the other side, a woman keeps calling a name, her voice already worn out. Eva touches her sleeve, then her shoulder, then puts both hands on her own face for a moment, like she's holding herself together. The woman blinks, nods, and keeps going. The smells hit first. Sweet, charred wood, smoke and metal. Then images come like stamps. A cat runs across a courtyard with singed fur. A boy in a cap carries a folded flag, the kind hung from windows on holidays, and it's the only clean thing on the street. A man sits on steps holding an empty bird cage, staring at it like the bird will come back if he just watches. At the edge of the old town, they stop. The wind shifts and heat slaps their faces. They duck behind a low wall and look back. Victor tries to make sense of it. All he can say is, "It's gone." He takes Eva's hand. They keep walking towards somewhere that might have a bed that isn't burning. The raids last 3 days, February 13th through 15th, wave after wave. Dresden's defences are thin. The arguments about strategy and morality will go on for years. But for Victor and Eva, what matters is the heat on their faces and the hole where the theatre used to be. A neighbour says the north side is worse, another says the south. Nobody has a map you can trust. They choose south because the wind is pushing them that way. A plank with nails floats past on a gust of air. Eva yanks Victor aside. The nails miss his shin by inches. He stares at those nails like they're trying to tell him something, then forces himself to move. By dawn, the city sounds tired. Quiet comes in pieces. A voice stops shouting. A dog stops. A building falls. Then nothing falls. The wind dies down. People step out and look up. Some cry, some don't. When they find a working pump, there's already a line. A man ahead mentions that last night the radio called it a triumph somewhere else. He says it flat, not angry, because he's got nothing left for that. Someone at the back of the line laughs once and coughs. Victor drinks, coughs, leans on the handle, and looks at his notebook. He writes, "Words were weapons for them. Tonight, words were ash." He doesn't show it to anyone. A firestorm happens when heat from clustered fires rises fast enough to pull air in from all sides. The updraft sucks in more oxygen. The air rushes in harder. Temperatures get hot enough to melt glass. Doors and windows slam shut from the pressure. In Dresden, all that physics met old wooden houses and narrow streets. Once the fire got momentum, there was nothing ordinary people could do to stop it. By the second night, Victor and Eva navigate through what's missing instead of what's there. They eat dry bread. They sit on steps and share chocolate with a girl whose face is black with soot, except where tears have cut tracks. The girl holds that chocolate like it's precious. She takes a tiny bite and saves the rest. Victor and Eva stop looking back. You can't walk if you look back too long. Whatever people said in their kitchens about holding doorways, those words don't hold roofs up. The night taught that lesson faster than any speech could. By morning, the lesson was written in ash. It's April 20th, 1945. Berlin is falling apart. The windows are just gone. People have tied curtains together as ropes so they can climb to safer floors when the shelling gets bad. In a courtyard near the city centre, a woman named Marta is standing at a hand pump with a bucket. The pump spits out mud before anything drinkable comes through. Marta used to be a journalist, and she'll be one again someday, but right now she's learning the first rule of staying alive: keep your face blank. Panic gets you noticed, and attention is something you can't afford. The stairwells have rules now. Nobody wrote them down, but everyone knows them anyway. Keep your voice low. Only share news if you've heard it from 2 different people. Want privacy? Hang a sheet across your doorway. Don't leave your bucket sitting around. When soldiers show up, you go still and quiet, like you're looking in a mirror. You stay flat, expressionless, until you figure out which ones might actually listen to words and which ones only understand fear. Marta's first encounter with soldiers happens fast and rough. When the shelling stops for an hour, 2 soldiers pull her into a side room. Afterward, when she can breathe again, she makes a decision. She finds a Soviet officer and tells him exactly what she needs. Protection from other men in exchange for his company, and maybe a few rooms where she can lock a door and actually sleep. Later, she writes that she did it of her own accord, but that phrase sits heavy in her diary. Accord usually means you had real choices. Here, the choice is between being attacked repeatedly or having some kind of arrangement that might actually keep other women in the building safer too. The building adapts around this agreement. Everyone learns to live with it, like walking with a limp. Women without an officer start talking to women who have one. Some of them get offered the same deal. Some take it, and the quiet in the hallway says everything. Nobody judges because nobody wants to be dragged down the stairs by their hair. The men left in the building, too old or unfit for the war, learn to disappear. They help however they can. Tools, food, silence. Hunger becomes your clock. You count the days by how many times you climb 6 flights of stairs with a bucket, then by the size of bread you get back after standing in line for 2 hours. More than 1.5 million Soviet soldiers are moving through the city block by block, with tanks and artillery and engineers and cooks and medics. Every block takes time and blood. The moment that first flag goes up, occupation starts running in the background, checkpoints, ration cards, orders to register, all while Marta is trying to figure out how to just be a person in a building that's surviving one day at a time. On a different street, a young woman named Marie Jalowicz Simon is moving from doorway to doorway like she's walking on ice. Marie is young, educated, and Jewish, the same law that tried to erase Victor Klemperer. She ripped off her identifying star long ago and disappeared underground. She lives on stories, new names, new addresses, jobs she makes up on the spot. Every decision matters. Do I smile at this person? Do I talk to them? Do I ask for help? The wrong choice ends everything. The right choice buys you another afternoon. She survives by reading people the way other people read maps. She moves through apartments and shops and back rooms, through 44 and into 45. She knows which stairs creak and which landlady will pretend not to notice if you fix her leaky sink. Just getting through the day becomes a puzzle. The water stops running because the pipes are smashed. The shelling didn't stop at street corners, so everything underground is destroyed. Sewage backs up into basements. The power grid fails completely, and with it go all the radios that used to tell people what to think at dinner time. Without electricity, every building becomes its own small world. Water gets pumped by hand, boiled on coal scraps, and carried up staircase after staircase by arms that won't stop shaking. Food arrives first as rumours, then as ration lists. If you have cigarettes, you can trade for bread. A padlock becomes safety. If you have neither, you either have people who help you or you have nothing. Marta writes about how hunger makes time stretch out. She tells her diary how many hours she spent waiting for just one ladle of soup and how her legs shook the whole time from carrying buckets up the stairs. She notes that the radio still blares with deep voices talking about will and sacrifice, but most days it's off anyway. There's no electricity. The voice that screamed for total war has to compete now with the scrape of a pot and the crank of a pump, and most of the time it loses. In the stairwell, there's a neighbour who wouldn't make the same arrangement Marta made. She gets attacked a second time, then a third, but the building closes around her. A man with a limp volunteers to sleep in a chair by her door. 2 women switch rooms to put her closer to the major, who understands the unwritten rules everyone's making up in the ruins. People actually get to sleep for 3 hours straight instead of just 2. The first soldiers who arrive do what they want. Morning brings a second group with forms and stamps. Marta watches as order pushes chaos back, inch by inch. She writes down the absurdities, because they're proof too. On a quiet day, a woman argues with a clerk about her ration card date, like order and collapse depend on the right ink mark. The voice that punished defeatists has lost its megaphone. The courts that humiliated people over their words are silent now. The city listens to spoons, bed frames creaking, carts squeaking over broken stone. If anyone says final victory out loud anymore, nobody puts it in their diary. Survival is negotiation now. People are building rules to stop the worst from happening again tomorrow. Everyone knows the rules are ugly. Everyone knows they work better than nothing. A room in Berlin. The People's Court ran its sessions under giant banners that made everything feel official and permanent. The judge was Roland Freisler, a man who turned trials into theatre. He'd shout, he'd mock people, he'd cut them off mid-sentence. He could make silence feel like a confession. He sentenced thousands and called it justice. People listening on the radio learned to fear that room, not just the verdicts, but the whole humiliating performance that came before them. Early February 1945, while the court did what it always did, an air raid started. Sirens cut through everything. A bomb found a building somewhere above. The building came apart. In the hallway, a clerk was still carrying files to a safer room. Old habits die hard, even when you should be running. Freisler stepped into that hallway. A blast threw him against the stone wall. When the dust cleared, papers were scattered everywhere. That voice never filled the courtroom again. In wartime, news travels crooked, but crooked news still matters. People who'd learned to keep their heads down started saying normal things again. We're hungry. This is wrong. They didn't shout. They didn't need to. The fear that made every word dangerous had lost some of its power. The law was still written down somewhere, but the office it came from felt hollow. Back in Laubach, Friedrich Kellner put it simply in his diary. Propaganda can sway crowds, but it can't beat the truth. Not truth in some grand sense, just the real stuff. The bread is smaller than it was last week. Boys are wearing their uncle's uniforms. The court had turned neighbours into informers and men into cowards. Fear works as a tool, but if you use it too hard in the same place, it breaks. The court and the radio worked together. The radio carried the tone, mockery for anyone who doubted, certainty about what would happen. It gave them power. It made undermining morale mean practically anything. A joke in your kitchen could be a crime. It made reporting on your neighbours feel like doing your duty. A man at the dinner table watched his own words, like the room might be listening. Imagine your kitchen with one new rule. If someone thinks you sound tired, the state gets to ask you why. That's a cold feeling you carry around. The voice that called others defeatists ended up caught in the same violence it helped create. But something shifts when that voice goes quiet. You hear it in the way neighbours start arguing about ration cards again, in the way someone tells a joke that isn't code. The war isn't over, but the fear has cracks in it. The institutional voice breaks. Confidence becomes interruption, becomes silence. What comes next isn't another big voice. It's just ordinary people talking again. By April 1945, white fabric had become something like a ticket to stay alive. Bedsheets, undershirts, tablecloths, anything that could be tied to a stick and waved without getting shot. On the Western Front alone, more than 1 million German soldiers gave up that month. Fields became crowded holding areas as far as you could see. Men came on foot, in trucks, on bicycles with flat tyres they were too tired to ride. In the Ruhr pocket, about 300,000 soldiers put down their rifles. Guns stacked up like firewood with bolts left hanging open. An officer looked at a map that didn't matter anymore and told his men to line up, hand over their weapons and move. For them, the war just ended. No big moment. Just paperwork, a tag, a canteen, someone filled who was wearing a different uniform the day before. On a road in central Germany, 16-year-old Hans-Georg Henke ran into an American patrol. A GI offered him a cigarette. Henke took it. Someone snapped a photo at that exact second. The boy's face broke like a tent when you pull out the pole. Tears rolled down. He was hungry. He was alive. He wasn't a soldier anymore. The camera kept clicking. Taking in all these surrenders was like running a factory. Trucks lined up one after another. Forms got filled out. Names got scrambled by clerks, doing their best with German names they'd never seen before. Dog tags were collected. Belts were counted to stop soldiers from harming themselves, which was happening. Guards decided who went where. Officers in one area, regular soldiers somewhere else. Water came in buckets. Food was plain but steady for the first time in years. Medical staff checked for old, infected wounds. Back in Berlin, white flags showed up there too. The city surrendered on May 2nd. Marta folded her sheet and put it away because clean fabric was too hard to come by to waste on gestures. She stood in line for a new ration book in a building that used to be a school. A clerk stamped her paper and told her to come back tomorrow for another stamp and a smaller loaf of bread. In Laubach, Kellner wrote One More Night by Lamplight. He mentioned the white flags in a single sentence. No celebration, no sadness. He wrote like he was placing a stone on a grave to show he'd been there and remembered. A few hundred miles west in a field hospital, the GI who handed out cigarettes told his friend that the German kid who cried looked like someone's little brother. He said it without anger, the way you'd mention that the sky was clear that day or the coffee was weak. By the end of April, the Western Allies had captured millions of German prisoners, enough men to fill a dozen big cities. The fighting in the east was still brutal, but these white flags in the west were real. The voice that demanded total war had gotten quiet. The courts that threatened to punish anyone who gave up basically disappeared. Boys and old men who raised their hands now stood in lines that stretched past hedgerows as far as you could see. For Henke, survival came in small things. He ate food that wasn't a stolen beet. He slept under a roof where nobody woke him by kicking his boots. That camera caught him crying, followed him for a few more shots, then moved on to something else. He grew into a man. That moment stayed frozen in a photograph, and when people saw it years later, they felt that same hollow break in their own chests, that sudden rush of someone who wanted to be tough and realized all that was left was being honest. Belief turned into surrender. Oaths became white cloth. Posters became blankets. The promise to hold every street became a line of men walking out of that street into a field with a fence around it. Dresden, early morning. Smoke drifts low over the city and sunlight cuts across a windowsill that's barely hanging on to what's left of the window frame. Victor Klemperer stands there with his notebook, writing. The street looks strange now when the wind dies down. The whole city has changed shape. He's made it through, and that's turned him into a witness. Witnesses have a job to do. Tell people what you saw. Say what you really thought. Keep those pages safe. A week later in Berlin, Marta Hillers wakes up hungry. She ties her hair back, scrapes the bottom of a pot, and splits the last spoonful with a neighbour. She says it out loud. We're still here. 2 months ago, saying that would have gotten her killed. Now, it's just words in the air. She folds a piece of paper and slides it into a drawer, her diary, full of days that each felt like forever. Over in Laubach, after the last radio broadcast, Friedrich Kellner blows out his lamp and tells his wife Pauline it's finished, not the hunger, not the grief. The loud lie finally stopped. He puts his notebook away like you'd put away a tool after you're done with a job. It looks small for all it's done. But that's exactly the point. Tools don't have to be big to change things. There's a radio sitting on a shelf in one of these rooms, wooden case with the corners all banged up, the dial still pointing to a station that used to blast out orders and contempt. A hand reaches over and turns the knob to off. No voice, no speech, just silence, filling the room like a blanket, not like a threat. May 7th and 8th, those are the official turning points on the calendar. But for these people, the real proof isn't in some government file. It's in these smaller moments. Victor writing down words about ash. Marta's note about hunger and time. Kellner's quiet line on fear. A picture of a boy who stopped pretending to be made of steel. The end isn't the last page of anything official. It's a window with morning light coming through. It's a radio that someone switched off because the people in the room would rather hear each other talk.